All right, good evening, everyone. So apologies for having this video report late. So this is in continuation for the school and curriculum development under Chapter 9, which talks about unpacking curriculum standards and competencies. So at this point of time, we are going to talk all about the steps for unpacking curriculum standards and competencies. So there are different kinds of steps. There are these chronological steps that we must follow in classifying the standards, knowledge, and skills. And step one talks about classify standards as knowledge, skills, and values. So knowledge, if it is the learning competency, calls for remembering and basic comprehension of a concept or a skill. And on the other hand, skill, if the learning calls for the learner to demonstrate or apply a specific skill or desired behavior. While values, if the learning competency calls for valuing and appreciation. Alright, to discuss further all of these three standards that we have mentioned a while ago. So there are these different examples for that we can demonstrate, and here are the examples for knowledge. First, we have the discuss the different forms of government. So this example belongs to knowledge because it will give us an insight, a concept, or a skill about the different forms of government. Next, we have analyze the importance of water for living organism. So this will give us also knowledge. This will impart us knowledge, give the cycle of the importance of water for living organism. So as such, this example really belongs to knowledge because it will give us knowledge, it will give us ideas about how important the water is for our living organism. Next, we have discussed the rules in subject-verb agreement. Of course, as rules, so in subject-verb agreement or in an English class, of course, it is more on imparting the knowledge about the subject-verb agreement, the proper usage of subject-verb agreement, or in other words, the proper usage of grammar rules. Next, we have define percentage. This is more on mathematical formula. So it will give us knowledge about how to define percentage, how to answer percentage, or how to compute percentage on the other hand. So moving on, we have also the examples for skill. So we have, let us all remember, it belongs to skill if it demonstrate or apply a specific behavior or desired concept or skill. First, we have calculate cost of production. Sorry for the mispronounced word. Calculate cost of production. So it belongs to skill. It's because there is a desired behavior that is being presented or that is being realized. The calculation process really belongs to skill. It's because it really needs a skill, right? We cannot calculate a cost of reduction if we don't have that mathematical skills in our selves, right? Next, we have plan and menu. So this is also a skill. It's because it is more on planning a menu. It is more on experiences. It is more on a shall I say we cannot plan a menu if we don't have this specific of cooking skill, right? So that is why this example really belongs to skill. Moving on to the third example, we have solved word problems. Of course, it is more on mathematical formula, and we needed mathematical skills here. And good for those who are really good in math, so they can really solve word problems. Next, we have calculate the mean and median. So this really also calls for a mathematical skill. That's why this for example, belongs to skill standards rather. Next, we have the examples for values. So values really focuses on specific behavior that we must realize or we must practice. So examples for values, we have appreciate various forms of literature. So if we tend to acculturize, or shall I say, there is a acculturation process wherein we tend to appreciate the various forms of literature wherein different cultures has been observed. So in that way, you are showing a value standards. Next, we have recognized the importance of cooperation and unity in achieving goals. So this really focuses on values that we have or the specific behavior that we have in championing unity amidst diversity. Next, we have respect different national symbols of the country. So it is more on culture-sensitive character or culture-sensitive values, wherein we tend to respect the different kinds of symbols of the different countries. Especially in Southeast Asian countries, we have different symbols. We have different symbolic figures that we can see all around Asia. So that is why if you have this kind of character, if you have this kind of characteristics, being a culture sensitive person, then you are you've shown to be an example of a culture sensitive person, or shall we say culture friendly person. So and that calls for a values characteristic. Next, we have appreciate examples of Baroque music. So we all know that Baroque music is some sort of Renaissance music, wherein we tend to appreciate all of those old music that we have. We tend to appreciate the music of our ancestors, and that way that belongs to values. So moving on, we have here examples or activity that we can examine based on our learning competencies. We tend, at this point of time, we shall try to identify whether the learning competencies belongs to knowledge, as for skills or values. So we have here the different kinds of content standard. So we have here the content, the nature of inquiry and research. So content standard. So the learner demonstrate understanding of, number one, we have the importance of research in our daily life. And then number two, the characteristics, processes, and ethics of research. And number three, quantitative and qualitative research. And of course, number four, the kinds of research across fields. So performance standards, we have the learner is able to use appropriate kinds of research in making decisions. We have learning competencies. We have the learner shares research experiences, knowledge, explains the importance of research in daily life, and then describes characteristics, processes, and ethics of research, and differentiate quantitative from qualitative research. And number five, we have provide examples of research in areas of interest, such as arts, humanities, sciences, business, agriculture, and fisheries, information, and technology. So moving on to the step two of unpacking curriculum standards and competencies, we have number two, identify the prerequisite knowledge, skills, values for each learning competency. For example, describe the changes in materials based on the effect of temperature from solid to liquid, liquid to gas, liquid to solid rather, liquid to gas, or solid to gas. So at this point of time, we tend to identify the prerequisite knowledge, skills, and values for each learning competencies. So in other words, we tend to describe what happened for, in this example, what happens or what changes in materials. Thus, solid to liquid that has been observed, right? So as well as the liquid to solid observation or experimentation. So and so on and so forth. So before the students can actually describe the changes in materials based on the effect on temperature, of course, they should be able to do the following. First is to describe the temperature as hot or cold. And then second, we have observed the effect of temperature on materials. So before they can assess the effects on the materials based on the temperature, of course, first things first, they should describe if it is hot temperature or it is a cold temperature, right? And then observe the effect on temperature and materials. And that way, they can experiment, or they can realize, or they can see that there has something changed, or it doesn't change at all when based on the observations that they have. So the prerequisite knowledge, skills, and values could serve as an instructional objectives for the lesson. Please take note of that. Moving on to the third step, we have look for desired skills or behavior in every competency. So in this step, we are to look for the desired skills or behavior in every competencies. And then we must identify the most suitable activity for each desirable behavior. So in such way, we tend to understand what desired skills is observed in every competencies. And then at that point of time, we must choose the best or suitable activity for that desired skill. So for example, we have it is all about competencies rather. For example, we have create crafts that can be locally assembled with local materials guided by the local traditions and traditional techniques rather. For example, we have hobby, lilip, and etc. So, the desired behavior or skill in this learning competency, if the students to create crafts assembled with the local materials, guided by the local traditional techniques, then we can apply this activity hobby and lilip through, of course, to our students. There should be a lecture workshop activity, wherein we tend to demonstrate or to show to them how to properly, based on traditional techniques that has been observed in your in your locality. So there should be a lecture based on this activities such as hobby or lilip. So in that way, this competency really calls for a local based lecture workshop, wherein you tend to go to a specific area wherein a hobby and lilip is being practiced, and in that way rather, so lecture workshop should be done in by the local or the most shall we expert in that field, such as expert in hobby or lilip, especially for our ancestors who are really good at that. So if the lecture workshop really takes place, then of course you should call for specific persons who are traditionally expert in hobby or lilip activities. And then if it is project-based approach or individual group project, so the activities of course will serve as an instructional strategies for teaching and learning competencies. So in such way, it is not just appreciating the culture that we have in your locality. Of course, you tend to know or to understand how to properly demonstrate these traditional techniques that has been done by generations. So moving on to the fourth step of this unpacking curriculum standards and competencies is classifying learning competencies to determine appropriate assessment tools. So this process is based on the works of Gladhorn in 1998. So the standard with conventional testing or SAT, these are learning competencies that require traditional assessment tools like quizzes and exams. Example number 1, describe the characteristics of sound, and then identify the primary colors, discuss the judicial system in the Philippines, and explain the different communication models. So standard with conventional testing, of course, it is more unlike quizzes and exams that has been practiced over time. It is not traditional. I'm sorry. It is not shall we say, has not been practiced by at this modern times, but although it is traditional tools, but it is still timely and relevant in our recent times. So the standards with performance tasks. So these are learning competencies that require performance for assessment or authentic assessment. So a while ago, we have discussed this conventional testing, which merely focus on traditional assessment tools such as quizzes and exams. So this time, it is more on performance based. So these learning competencies require performance or assessment or authentic assessment. For example, performing examples of Philippine folk dance, and then write an essay about a selected topic, demonstrate how to dissect and insect, and then paint using natural and indigenous materials. So this is really more on a performance-based assessment. Next, we have standards for continuing development or SCD. So these are competencies that focus on values and attitudes that cannot be assessed. So these are the strategies. We can use standards or SCD standards for continuing development if these values or attitudes cannot be assessed. Actually, first we have recognized basic human rights of a person. Of course, we cannot assess that. And then we have appreciate the rule of mathematics in everyday life, and then develop healthy eating habits, and then respect cultural practices. We cannot really assess that. So in that way, we can have the standards for continuing development. Next, we have, for this activity, let's just skip this because it is an online activity. It is not, we are having this report online, but I'm going to read it to all of you. Examine the learning competencies if its classification and assessment tools. So demonstrate the testing of an automotive battery. So select the appropriate test equipment, test the different types of batteries, analyze test results, compare battery test results based on manufacturer specification, and then observe safety at all times while doing battery tests, and then report findings of tests. So this is a really a chronological order on how to demonstrate or to test an automotive battery. And then moving on, so the result, of course, if especially for this automotive class, so the result will have teachers identify the nature of competency and the type of assessment tools to be used for the measuring students' performance for every competencies. So it is important that the assessment tools are aligned to the curriculum competencies. Of course, assessment tools should be aligned with the curriculum. So that would be all. Thank you so much.